Wish TV. All Indiana Politics
is your premier source for Indiana politics.
Focusing on issues that matter to you.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage, exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders, expert analysis on critical legislation. From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Central Indiana. Wish TV is now live on YouTube TV and Hulu Live, offering more hours of local programming than any other station. Search for Wish TV or look for CW8 on both YouTube TV and Hulu Live to find us. Watch local news, sports, and lifestyle shows live from Wish TV. You can still catch Wish TV free over the air or stream it live on wishtv.com and on the free Wish TV mobile apps. Wish TV, available in more places for the latest news, weather, and sports.
Don't let high golf rates drive you out of bounds. Save big with the Wish TV Great Golf Club card.
Central Indiana's largest golf club card membership is back for the 8th season with more courses than ever before. Save over 75% on tee times at 27 Central Indiana golf courses. All you need is the Wish TV Great Golf Club card. Cards are valid for the entire 2026 golf season.
Great courses, great savings. Score your Great Golf Club card today.
Now, from Wish TV, your local news source. This is All Indiana Politics.
Hello, everyone. Good Sunday morning and welcome to another edition of All Indiana Politics. I'm Phil Sanchez. Congressman Andre Carson says the Supreme Court's ruling on the Voting Rights Act could jeopardize local congressional districts. This after the court ruled any lawsuits against potential racial gerrymandering must prove intentional discrimination. Carson talked to our government reporter Garrett Berquist. He also addressed the shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
Let's bring in Congressman Andre Carson. Congressman, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. What an honor.
I want to begin with the Supreme Court's Voting Rights Act ruling. You've called it a step backwards. What specifically do you believe this will lead to?
Well, I think that the Supreme Court's decision to strike down a majority-minority voting district in Louisiana is a very bad decision. History will judge this decision very harshly, just like Plessy versus Ferguson, another bad decision from Louisiana, which legalized racial segregation and unleashed generations of Jim Crow separate but equal state-sponsored discrimination. Now, in this case, the lower courts found that the state of Louisiana unlawfully suppressed Black representation in Congress. And they ordered a fair redistricting map to correct the long and persistent violations of the Voting Rights Act in Louisiana. And instead of respecting the lower court decision, this Trump administration has argued the wrong position and fought to eliminate the second minority-majority voting district. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court brought this very flawed argument which ignores the fact on the ground in Louisiana today. It also ignores the very historic and electoral legacy of Plessy and the persistent and active discrimination against minority voting representation in the state today.
I want to read to you a passage from the majority opinion written by Justice Sam Alito. He wrote, interpreting Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act to outlaw a map solely because it fails to provide a sufficient number of majority-minority districts would create a right that the amendment does not protect. He said the act is only applicable in cases of intentional discrimination. How do you respond to that line of thought?
You know, I think this is another way to justify the hollowing out of the Voting Rights Act without doing it very obviously. I mean, it's obvious to me and those who are aware, but this was a 6-3 decision. It was very partisan. And, you know, the court technically kept Section 2 of the VRA intact. But, you know, it's the latest, I think, in a series of rulings that have basically demolished the 1965 law. And that came out of the hard work of the civil rights movement. And it really galvanized and shielded the voting bloc and leverage of racial minorities, particularly the Black vote.
The southern states in a lot of cases are subject to rules under the VRA that other states such as Indiana are not subject to. Does that somewhat limit the potential impact of the ruling here?
Places like Indiana, Indianapolis, places like Illinois, obviously, and Midwestern districts, even districts in other states, they were still created with the VRA in mind. So these are VRA spirited districts. And so I think in a sense of equity and equal representation and protecting communities of interest, the General Assembly's created these districts with those things in mind, which is critically important.
Let's turn to the shooting at the White House Correspondents Association dinner. I want you to call on your law enforcement experience here. Based on the information that has come out so far, was this a failure by the Secret Service?
I wouldn't say it was a failure by the Secret Service. They have a very tough job. I just met with the Secret Service 2 weeks ago for a briefing on situational awareness. I applaud the work that they do. Even as a police officer, I used to go and have lunch with them regularly along with the FBI. And, you know, I'm relieved that everyone is safe, including the president and the first lady. And I hope that the culprit is held accountable to the fullest extent of the law. And unfortunately, there are countless families who have experienced the fear and panic of a mass shooting. We need gun violence to end, period. Whether you're the president of the United States or a young student or someone living on the far east side of Indianapolis or west side.
How do we balance the need to protect the president and the people who attend his events with the need to keep the president open and accessible to voters?
That's a balancing act that has always been an ongoing struggle for the Secret Service and state police and IMPD and the Sheriff's Department. I mean, you know, local PD, they in the Sheriff's Department, they help with our security of myself and staff, you know, oftentimes at events. And it's always a struggle because you want to be accessible and you want to present yourself as being accessible to the public. The sad part is that a lot of times people will take advantage of that accessibility and try to do you harm. We saw what happened with my dear friend and sister Ilhan Omar recently at a town hall. And oftentimes we know that state actors and even non-state actors and local extremists and people who are disturbed want to create events indirectly through other people to lure you into a place where they can do you harm. So as someone who has also done personal protection, it is certainly an ongoing struggle and balancing act.
Much of the attention surrounding the political rhetoric in this country concerns President Trump, but do Democrats also bear some responsibility? There are quite a few on the left, for example, who use the term fascist to describe the president and his supporters.
Well, I think in these political battles, our rhetoric increases, things get heated. People say things that are provocative, oftentimes for effect, oftentimes in the heat and spirit of the moment. And then there are others who are outright vicious and mean, and they contribute to a very hostile and destructive environment, the kind of environment that could do harm on both sides. So I think while we're fiery in our language, oftentimes, as I've had to do, we should walk back and be aware that we don't let the spirit of debate or campaigns or critiques overcome our ability to still be civil and disagree without being disagreeable and cause harm to one another.
Congressman Andre Carson, thank you for joining us.
What an honor. Thank you.
All right, coming up, anti-redistricting Republicans face challengers backed by the president and the governor. We take a closer look at how those primaries are shaping up going into Tuesday. Welcome back. 8 state Senate Republicans who voted against redrawing Indiana's congressional districts face primary challengers. Both President Trump and Governor Mike Braun have endorsed all of those challengers. Garrett Berquist takes a closer look at those races.
Primary challengers in state legislative races are not unheard of, but political insiders tell me this year's primary is very unusual.
Senator Jim Buck. Okay. We're going door to door.
In the closing days of the primary, Buck is trying to reach people who have not voted yet.
Normally in a primary, we have what's kindly referred to as a family food fight. But we've never had a primary like this where somebody outside the family as determining how that food fight should occur.
Buck is one of 8 Senate Republicans running for re-election who voted against a proposal to redraw Indiana's congressional maps mid-decade. All of them now face primary challengers. In Buck's case, it's Tipton County Commissioner Tracy Powell. Powell did not respond to repeated requests for an interview. Those challengers all visited the Oval Office earlier this year. They've been endorsed by both President Donald Trump and Governor Mike Braun.
I was kind of surprised, candidly, when we had a president, a vice president, a governor, a lieutenant governor, a sitting U.S. senator, and a number of sitting congresspeople coming against us. That's just unheard of.
It's very unusual for a president, or even to some extent the governor, to come out and endorse some of these incumbents, especially Republican incumbents that are part of their own party.
Masalamani says outside groups are spending $500,000 or more per race on attack ads. He says 4 or 5 incumbents are at serious risk of losing their primary. He says he counts Buck among that group.
Now the question is, of the primary challengers that win, of those 4 or 5, is the Trump team and the super PACs going to help support them in the November election? Because if they help them win in the primary but don't give them the tools and resources, then Republicans just lost a number of seats that they're not going to be able to recover from, and they're possibly going to lose a supermajority.
All the seats in question will have Democratic challengers in November.
I always run as if I'm behind. I've never counted my chickens before they hatch.
Buck says his colleagues who also face challengers are doing the same thing.
So I hope they all make it back, because I love them dearly. They're great legislators. We're looking forward to each day, what it brings on the campaign, and then we'll all gather at headquarters and see what happens Tuesday night.
If you have not voted yet, you have until noon on Monday if you want to vote early. On primary day itself, which is this coming Tuesday, the polls will be open from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. In Westfield, I'm Garrett Bergquist for Wish TV and WishTV.com.
And we will see what happens. We've made it really easy for you to check your voter registration. Take out your phone, scan the QR code on your screen. That will take you to the As Seen On section of our website, WishTV.com. Our voter guide includes links to check your registration and your polling location, plus a guide on how to use them. All right, coming up, Indiana's best political team tells us what they'll be watching for on Tuesday night after the break.
The opinions expressed by guests on this broadcast are solely those of the individual speaking and do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of Wish TV.
All right, welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome in 2 members of Indiana's best political team, Republican Lacey Berkshire and the newest member of our team, Democrat Brad Boswell. Good to see you both.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
Brad.
good to be here.
Of course, absolutely. Let's begin with the state Senate primaries. Lacey, how much are these primary challengers kind of resonating with voters, in your opinion?
I think anybody who tells you they know the answer to that is full of it.
Right.
I think, polls aren't what they used to be. Polls used to be really reliable. You used to be able to count on those. That's not been the case for probably a decade now. I don't know what's going to happen on Tuesday. I'm just going to be honest. I don't think anyone does. I think a lot of these races are too close to call. I think ultimately you're going to have a couple incumbents are going to lose. A couple incumbents are going to stay. I think you're going to have enough blood taken from both sides where both the MAGA crowd and kind of Senator Bray and the Senate Majority Campaign Committee, everybody's going to be able to call victory, which of course means no one won. But
Right.
I think that's where we're at.
Brad, a little unusual, though, for a governor and a president to get involved in local politics, no?
Very unusual, but 'tis the sign of the times, I suppose. But I think we're in a situation where I don't know what else they want from these people. We've got Senator Rogers, who's carried every school choice piece of legislation she's asked to take. We've got Senator Holdman, who was the author of Senate Bill 1, who changed our property tax laws. So
Sure.
In this case, these are tried and true Republicans, but apparently that wasn't enough. So here we are.
How does this affect Democrats after the primary?
Well, it depends on the outcome of the race. So as Lacey said, there may be some that go one way or go the other. If these insurgents win, I think that's a positive sign for some of the districts for Democrats that maybe we've got a shot to get in there and take some of these seats back and break up that supermajority.
Yeah, okay, we'll see what happens with that. I know you said it's kind of, nobody can really tell, Lacey, what's going to happen, but what do you think the most likely outcome is? Do they stand pat, or do they go in the other direction, voters?
I think for the most part they're going to stand pat. I think Brad's right. I think a lot of these folks, these incumbents, are really good Republicans, and these districts know it, and the voters know it. I think it's unfortunate that redistricting has kind of become this purity test for our party. I think we saw, those litmus tests are what's killed the Democratic Party in the last couple of years. It's unfortunate that we've made this the litmus test, because he's right. I mean, these are really conservative people and really good Republicans who've done a lot for their districts and done a lot for the state the last couple of years, and it's just unfortunate that that's become the litmus test of are you a rhino or not is redistricting, when a lot of their districts were overwhelmingly against it in the first place.
Right, yeah, we covered that extensively here.
Yep.
Going into Tuesday night, and this one's for both of you, and we'll start with you, Lacey, is which races are you looking at specifically?
Brad talked about Senator Rogers. I'm watching that one for sure. It'll be a huge loss if she doesn't return, especially in the education policy space, labor and employment. Another race that I'm watching that's interesting, it doesn't really have anything to do with redistricting, but it's Senator Brown's race, Senator Liz Brown up in Fort Wayne. And the reason I'm watching that is because politics makes such strange bedfellows sometimes. So up there, most of these primaries, we've got President Trump and Senator Banks and Attorney General Rokita against Senator Bray and the Senate Majority Campaign Committee. In that race, Senator Brown's got has President Trump's endorsement. She's being backed by Senate Majority Campaign Committee and Senator Bray, and then her opponent is backed by the Attorney General, Rokita, and Senator Banks.
Right.
So I'm really interested in kind of the dynamics of that race and how that shakes out, just given how the dynamics have played out so far.
Yeah. What about you, Brad?
I agree. The Senator Brown one creates a very interesting dynamic, but I'm going to keep an eye on Senator Good out in Terre Haute area. He's been around not only in elected office, but around the State House for a long time, and been very active in his community for a long time. And apparently his real crime here was going to his constituents and saying, I want to hear from you, I want to engage with you, what do you think about this redistricting? And he really followed their lead, and that's a pretty purple district. So if he goes down, that's a really good opportunity for Democrats in the fall. But I think that'll kind of be a bellwether for what happens in the future.
What about on the Democratic side for Tuesday?
On the Democrat side for Tuesday, that probably on the local side, that's where we're keeping most of our focus. On the statewide, we'll let the Republicans have all the attention.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. We'll turn now to the Supreme Court's Voting Rights Act ruling. How much of an impact, Brad, do you think that's going to have on Indiana?
Well, you had a really good discussion about that with Representative Carson a little bit ago. So the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act has a lot of implications for the southern states versus states like Indiana. That ruling is not going to have a direct effect on our congressional districts, at least as they're currently drawn and as we currently understand them. What I do think is going to happen, though, is that there's going to be pushback and motivation by voters, particularly Democrat voters and minority voters, to say, we care about this issue. We're going to turn out. We're going to not go quietly into the night because you want to, push us off to the side. So I think in Indiana, when we move forward, statewide races in particular, you're going to see really high turnout from minority voters. And I think that's going to have a large impact in 26 and in 28 and going forward.
Lacey, same question to you. And will there be any changes after the midterms, you think?
I don't think so. I think Brad's right. I think there's going to be very little effect on Indiana. This decision has. Our maps haven't been challenged in years and years and years, let alone a successful challenge in years and years under this provision or any others. And so I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on us. I think, right now, I think you could give a 4-year-old a crayon and construction paper, and I think they'd draw a supermajority Republican state, because that's what we are in the end. And so I don't think it really matters what you draw or how you draw it.
Let's talk about, quickly, we've got a minute 30 left, the state's attendant care audit. This one kind of gets in the weeds, so I want to be pretty specific here. So the audit estimated that Indiana had about $200 million in improper payments. Now, it was based on a sample of 625 cases, which is standard procedure. We should point that out. But maybe in your opinion, Lacey, was that too small of a sampling size?
I don't think so. And even if it is, it was what I think you had 2 providers who had 100% error rate and 2 that had 98%. So I think even if you take a bigger sample, you're still, that's still egregious and unconscionable to have that high of an error rate in those claims. It's crazy.
Brad, your thoughts, and also does this maybe the results validate some of Republicans' concerns?
Well, I'm glad to see that they're doing an audit, and I'm glad to see that they're digging in on it, and it's important that the administration is doing some governing and paying attention to the fiscal concerns of the taxpayers. As we move forward, I hope that they continue to keep that focus and maybe put some of these political issues aside that we're seeing going on right now in these primary fights. But it's a concerning finding.
Yeah,
for sure.
Okay, well, Brad, good first show.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us. Lacey, always good to see you.
Thanks.
Excellent tie too, Brad.
Good to see you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thanks. We look forward to seeing you soon. And thank you. We'll be right back.
The opinions expressed by guests on this broadcast are solely those of the individual speaking and do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of Wish TV.
Thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics. We'll, of course, be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30, and be sure to check out the All Indiana Politics podcast online at wishtv.com. Have a great rest of your weekend.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.